Anybody, anywhere,
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen.
This pass caught by Paulsen, the tight end.
And from 106.7 The Fan, Grant Paulsen.
This is Take Command with Logan Paulsen, who spent a decade in the NFL. I'm Grant Paulsen. Watch us on YouTube, 106.7 Team 980 YouTube channels. Subscribe to this podcast and get the audio wherever you get your pods. Listen, rate, review, comment, do all that stuff. It all helps us a ton. We think we give you a little different perspective with Logan's insight and analysis into the tape on this pod. So there is an offensive coordinator hire to talk about. The new OC for the Washington Commanders, a late Friday evening news dump of sorts. David Blough, the assistant quarterbacks coach the last 2 years in the building under Cliff Kingsbury. He finished the year, in fact, as their quarterbacks coach. That's a Rooney Rule hire, so you couldn't name him the quarterbacks coach because they had to interview some people outside of the building first, but he was the de facto interim QB's coach when Tavita Pritchard left. But if you look at it, he went from assistant quarterbacks coach in November to quarterbacks coach in December to NFL offensive coordinator in January. And Logan, we talked a lot about options here. We felt like if you're Dan Quinn, you only get one more crack at this. You got to hit a home run. And I was saying it's very likely he's just going to try to put the ball in the fairway here and just kind of, lay up a little bit. This is risky. This is ballsy, I think. This is high risk, high reward, because they're going with a guy who's never been an offensive coordinator, never been a play caller, but a guy they really like in their building.
Yeah, I think this is one of the ones where you kind of got to defer to the person and how they know the person, the staff. Because like on paper, there's not a lot of things where you're like that pop to you, right? Like he's never called plays, he's never installed an offense, and those things give me a little bit of consternation when talking about the hire specifically. But again, no one's going to know him better than Dan Quinn and Adam Peters and this staff. And the rumor is that he's an extremely talented young man who knows how to relate to the players at a high level. So I think that this is something that, again, you're betting on the person. Like when you're talking about, angel investing for small businesses or whatever, like you're betting on the person, you're betting on the individual. And I think that's what we're getting a little bit of here. And again, they've known him for, 3 years now. So they have a good grasp of who and what he is. And I think that's an important part of this equation that, again, like you and I are not going to be able to comment on fully because, again, we don't know him in a professional capacity.
David Blough, just to give a little background on who he is 30 years old. He will turn 31 during training camp, so he's a young guy. Again, a first-time coordinator. He was a quarterback in the NFL as recently as in training camp just a couple of years ago. He last started a game in the league in 2022. In fact, in his career, he started 7 games and he played in 9 games as a quarterback. Spent 3 years in Detroit with the Lions, and then the final year of his career playing, the last 2 starts under Cliff Kingsbury in Arizona. That's where their relationship comes from. His lead mentors, or I would say influences, to use like a band term, I guess, would probably be Ben Johnson in Detroit, who he played under, Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota, who he was a backup with. He's talked a lot about the O'Connell offense. And then you'd have to say Cliff as well, having obviously got his first job under Cliff, worked with him for 2 years, and started 2 of his 7 career games for Cliff Kingsbury as well. A couple other interesting notes about him. He is actually married to, I believe Melissa Gonzalez is the name, an Olympian, a sprinter, but this is Christian Gonzalez of the New England Patriots' sister. And there was this viral, amazing Hard Knocks video segment years ago where he was in the room with the Lions teammates all sitting around watching her try to qualify for the Olympics, which she successfully did. But that's a pretty cool nugget as well. But his brother-in-law is actually one of the great young cornerbacks in the NFL, in Christian Gonzalez. What do you make of his mentors like Ben Johnson, Cliff Kingsbury, Kevin O'Connell, and how that could impact what we end up seeing him put together offensively?
Yeah, I think you're going to get, I think there was like this rumor coming out of the building that, there was a little bit of a disagreement between Dan, Adam, whoever was involved, and Cliff in terms of running the football more. And when you look at 2 of those 3 offenses, the O'Connell offense and the Ben Johnson offense, obviously they are very much in the vein of Kyle Shanahan. I know Ben Johnson's not directly correlated or doesn't have a direct line to Kyle Shanahan, but the principles, man, like are really, really strong. We're going to run the football. We're going to set up play action pass. We're going to be in like formations. We're going to be under center, and we're going to find these play action chunks. And then again, we're going to have a very well thought out third down game plan. But I think the diversity of the run game is something that pops in both systems. And then the diversity of the play action pass, keeper, bootleg, waggle type game is very, very high in terms of opportunities to kind of strike the football down the middle and in that third level of the defense. So again, I like that. I like all, you said we're going to get a guy from the O'Connell, Ben Johnson tree and with a touch of Cliff Kingsbury, I'd say, man, that's excellent. Those are three really brilliant offensive minds. And again, probably, three of the guys kind of in the top 10 of the NFL, I'd say. So there's a lot to be excited there in terms of his exposure to offense. And I guess it'll just be interesting to see how you kind of meld that with Cliff and meld that with Jaden. I think one of the reasons I'm assuming he gets retained is because of his relationship with Jaden, which is an important part of this thing, right? Maybe the most important part of the thing is how comfortable Jaden is. But Jaden was in a spread offense at LSU. He's in a spread offense here under Cliff. And so how much of these other systems, this Kyle Shanahan West Coast, I'll call it, do you bring in here to Washington with Jaden Daniels' comfort level, what it was with the previous offense?
Yeah, I want to go back to the building of the offense and kind of melding those three philosophies together in a minute. But I think let's overturn the other stones here on how we got to David Blough, because lest we forget, the name that everybody was talking about was Mike McDaniel. Everybody seemed to think that could be the home run. That kind of happened in the 24 hours leading up to Blough, whether that was fair or not. That became, I think, the expectation. And I continued to hear, hold your horses on that, man. Blough is still very much a favorite for this job or someone they don't want out of the building. Detroit had reached out. They wanted to talk to Blough about their OC job. I think there's a really good chance he would have gotten that gig. If not promoted here, by the way, there are a bevy of teams that could have made him a pass game coordinator if they weren't willing to make him an OC and a play caller, because it is a pretty significant jump, obviously. But this is a guy that was going to get calls, was going to get interest. So how did we get here? I've got a handful of reasons why I think they went with Blough, and I want to get your kind of rapid-fire reactions to each of those. So the first thing I think is the relationship with Jaden Daniels. You just referenced this. You went away from Cliff Kingsbury. That is the only offense Daniels is known for 2 years. He's comfortable in it. You probably want something that helps to smooth that transition, and I think this does that. You're not going to go 0 to 100 out of Cliff's offense, right? Maybe you don't run as much tempo or as much no huddle or as much shotgun, or do some of the Cliffy things at 100. Maybe you turn them down to 50, and maybe Cliff wasn't willing to do that, but a David Blough, who's got some other paradigms and philosophies, might be willing to. So you could see that as a strength. If Daniels, just from a scheme standpoint, was really comfortable and liked what you did with Cliff, maybe having some of that carry over with Blough is actually a good thing in terms of easing the transition. We've talked about how hard it is to learn a new offense. Well, if you just go from Cliff to McDaniel, that is a stark, significant contrast, right? Whereas going to Blough might cushion that blow. And the other part of the Daniels relationship element is not even scheme related. Daniels has lost some real confidence in the building. And with Cliff leaving, he was not happy about that from what I was told. But on top of that, you've got Brian Johnson, who may or may not be back, who gets bypassed by Blough. You've got Tavita Pritchard, who's been his boy the last couple of years, who's now at Stanford. Who knows if Sam Hartman is back after they didn't play him at the end of the year. I'm not saying you have to make every decision based on Daniels, but it would also be malpractice if you don't make some decisions based on his comfort and his betterment and his ability to feel like he's got people he can learn with and confide in. So I just think that the rapport with Daniels, who Blough is close with, was huge, as well as the transition out of Cliff gets a little bit smoother maybe with Blough. That had to be a factor.
No, I think you're 100% right. And I think it's an important thing you want to consider, obviously. I think Jaden Daniels, in the grand scheme of things, is maybe the most important variable in getting them back to the playoffs in 2026. So, again, you want him to be as comfortable as possible. But, again, this is where, you're trying to parse out information. I'm trying to parse out information like everybody else, right? You want him to be comfortable. Obviously, David Blough provides that comfort, but you also want the offense to change. So how can you kind of walk that line, toe that line? What version of the offense you're going to run? And I just think about it from a verbiage standpoint. And again, like this is, like you said, this is an important variable, making sure Jaden Daniels is comfort. And now I get into the next element, which is how do you get that done, right? Are you kind of combining Cliff's offense with, Ben Johnson's offense or Kevin O'Connell's offense just as points of comparison? I think that becomes challenging, because if the verbiage you've been in the last 2 years is this, air raid spread offense, like one of the things that characterizes that offense, I'm going to call it spread because air raid I think is derivative and has a negative connotation, but this spread offense is you're going to be limited in terms of verbiage. Like think about the limited motion looks that they did, or under center looks, or the limited number of runs they had. Like the install is going to increase pretty dramatically. And how do you do that? Do you stay in Cliff's offense? Do you transition to a new language? If you're transitioning to a new language like Ben Johnson or Kevin O'Connell, you might as well just kind of scrap the Cliff thing and go back to traditional West Coast verbiage. So I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see how they handle keeping Jaden Daniels comfortable. Obviously, the person, the individual is a huge element of that, right? Like you want to have a good relationship, but it's more than that. It's more nuanced than that. It's more layered than that. And I think that's the thing that I really can't wait to see, because, I've installed offenses at a high school level, which is, 1,000 times easier than doing it at the NFL level. And that comes with a lot of challenges, right? A lot of verbiage challenges, a lot of communication things, a lot of system things that need to be built and understood, especially if you're going from a relatively simple offense to a more complicated offense. So that's the thing that I'm kind of keeping an eye on here, is how do you keep the comfort of the player while also getting the offensive structure that you're looking for? Again, like Dan, Adam, whoever, they said, I think Dan specifically wants more of a run first kind of mentality, run, play, action, pass kind of mentality. That's a different perspective, right? So whatever we're going to do, Jaden's going to be doing something different. And I think like that difference is something that is going to be really interesting to see how they manage that, going from a simple offense to a more complicated verbiage.
I want to get into, again, the building of the scheme with you in a few minutes, which we can tackle well, I think, on this pod in a way maybe that a lot of people can't, because you've done it at the high school level and you've been a part of it at the NFL level as a player for a long time. Two other things I wanted to bring up in terms of maybe why Blough or how they got here. The first is, in talking to people over there and around the team, when McDaniel became very popular as a name, I think they didn't want to wait to see if he could be their guy. Because not only could you lose Blough, as we talked about, go back to when they hired Eric Bieniemy with Ron Rivera a few years ago. If you remember, they kind of got left holding the bag. They were the last team in that search to make a hire. I'm not saying they didn't want Bieniemy, but I am saying they were the last team. He was kind of the last guy kicking around in that cycle. I don't think they wanted to risk the possibility of McDaniel, who's got his first head coaching interview coming up with the Titans on Wednesday. There will be others, by the way. I know the Browns will be interviewing him. I think other teams could get involved in that. There could still be teams dismissing coaches we don't even know about, and a quarter of the league has openings at this point, and this is an offensive savant. So there's a very real chance he becomes a head coach again this year. But if he doesn't, he is going to be a coordinator this year. Now, Washington's job is really good because you have Jaden Daniels, you would presume, because he has a relationship with Dan Quinn, who helped get him out of alcoholism, which is a very serious thing, and they're very, very close, and they're just tight in life and on the football field. Well, guess what? That makes Washington a landing spot, but is it better than Detroit, where you're going to call plays for Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam LaPorta and Jahmyr Gibbs? I don't think it necessarily is. Is it better than Baltimore? If Robert Saleh, who he's also very close with, who has a great relationship with McDaniel, if he gets the head coaching job in Baltimore and you're going to work with multi-time MVP Lamar Jackson, could you say that, that's a better job than Washington? So I think they were worried about the possibility that you wait. It takes weeks, not days. They wanted to move pretty quickly here to get someone they really liked. And that was a fear of theirs. The last thing is they really, really liked Blough. Now, whether that means he's ready to be an OC or not, I'm just telling you guys, and Logan, you know this probably better than I do, the amount of times over the last year and a half I've heard people rave about the ascension of David Blough, the import of David Blough, even plays like the touchdown to Zacchaeus against the Eagles comes to mind, but others that like he either helped draw up or call or said, hey, let's do this. Like they have given him his flowers a bunch and they really like him. I say that to say that when you pair that with, you cannot mistake how important Dan Quinn's past is to this. he has talked for 2 years about the biggest mistake he made in Atlanta being like letting these young guys he really liked offensively walk out of the building. When Kyle Shanahan got a job, Matt LaFleur and Mike McDaniel and all these dudes left him. And he said, yeah, go do your thing. I'll find a guy I like. And he got Sarkisian in there, and it backfired in a big, big way. He has brought that up like 30 times as the biggest mistake of his career, essentially, that derailed him. So here he is at the same crossroads in a sense, where like it would have been a hire that people thought was way too early to give Matt LaFleur that OC job in Atlanta. People would have laughed at him if he named Mike McDaniel his OC. He didn't. He did the quote-unquote safer thing, and he kicked himself for years. So now you're going, all right, I'm going to take some heat for this Blough thing, and it's going to be ballsy and risky, but I really think he could be good, or I could do something a little safer. And they feel like, last thing on McDaniel, he would have been one and done. That they think he would have been in here, come and gone, whereas they think Blough's a multi-year solution. Even if it goes great, it's hard to believe anybody's given David Blough a head coaching job a calendar year after he was an assistant quarterback. So this is, let's say it goes brilliantly, Logan, like a 2-year, 3-year plan maybe, as opposed to a one and done with McDaniel to get a head coaching job. So for all of those reasons for people listening, I think those are some of the reasons. If you're surprised, I get it. I think McDaniel would have been a home run. He was certainly at the very top of my list, but it's why I do not dislike what they've done with Blough. It's hard not to be exciting with a high ceiling, really ascending 30-year-old offensive mind.
No, I'm with you, and I do think the timetable for Mike McDaniel was a huge factor here because, again, there's no guarantee that he comes here, right? There's other opportunities, other jobs that I think he probably feels pretty fantastic about. I think he did a great job laying those out. So I understand the urgency with which they had to move here to make the Blough hire. I also think, like you said, there's no part of me that doesn't doubt that David Blough isn't super talented. There's no part of me, right? Because, again, there's enough of these reports like you're talking about, the play versus Philly, how Jaden Daniels responds to him, how competitive he is, how tough he is mentally, like the grinder that he brings, or the grind mentality that he brings to the offense, right? And I think the other point you brought up, which is fantastic, is the really talented offensive staff he had there in Atlanta and how he let out the building. The other thing, again, I can't help myself in these moments because it is unconventional. This is an unconventional hire in terms of how soon it happened. I look at it and I say to myself, like, yeah, it would have been great if he would have hired Matt LaFleur in Atlanta. But was Matt LaFleur ready to call plays then? And maybe he needed to be fired. Maybe he needed different management. Maybe he needed a different approach, right? Like, I think about Sean McVay, right? And how important Jay Gruden was in his development. Like, Sean was one of the smartest people that I've ever been around, right? But to have the insulation and the scaffolding of someone a little bit more experienced on the staff, I also think is important. And so I do think, like, yes, you want to draw comparisons and say, oh, this is exactly like Atlanta with Mike McDaniels, with Kyle Shanahan, with Matt LaFleur, all those guys, uber talented, uber smart guys. And obviously they've been great head coaches and at the innovation of offensive football over the last, decade. So again, like, I understand the regret there, but I also look at this and say to myself, like, sometimes, like, I remember talking to Kyle about this. Like, he was like, I'm not ready to be a head coach. I'm not ready for these steps because I need more time to learn the NFL. I need more time to learn other position coaches that I could hire, to build my Rolodex of coaches that I want to be a part of this thing, to really identify and cement my coaching style. And it's happened so quickly. Like, sometimes the adversity of firing or moving on, like, is something that is really important and impactful for coaches to learn from.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I want to double down on the fact. I keep coming back to home base on this. I'm presenting why I am excited about it and think it's high upside and could work out well.
Yeah.
It is incredibly risky. Like, it is not a safe call. It could get you fired if it doesn't go well. In fact, I texted with someone in the NFL after the hire who knows David Blough pretty well and actually thinks he's going to be like this really good coordinator eventually. And they're like, dude, the only thing I'm going to say is, like, every time I've ever been with someone really young in that role, it takes time. Okay. And I think back to Sean McVay in like 2015, maybe it was,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, it was not just this seamless thing. Sean will tell you it took a little while. In 2014, it was actually.
Yeah, 14.
We struggled. Cousins got benched. They kind of bounced around between quarterbacks. And it wasn't really until 15 that they found their rhythm. And the point was that they made, I just hope they're patient with him and they kind of give him some time. It can take a couple seasons. I don't think they're going to have that luxury, if I'm being very honest. Like, I think this is kind of a make or break year for Quinn. I think getting off to a fast start is paramount. I'm not even saying that's how it should be. I just feel like after this year, with the tenor of everything, that's how it is. So based on that, this is really, really risky. And I totally understand why people go, wow, assistant quarterbacks coach to play caller when you've never done it is insane. I'm not even telling you you're wrong. These are just the reasons why I think they're willing to roll the dice that I am presenting. I want to get into with you next, Logan, and I'll tee you up and kind of shut up, but I want to hear more about how you build this offense. Or like this guy doesn't have an offense currently at all.
Right.
He's building it from scratch. So how does that even work? Let's talk about that next on Take Command. Welcome back, Take Command. David Blough is the new offensive coordinator of the Washington Commanders. I'm actually curious. I should have asked you this last segment. Have you had many interactions with him at all yet? Or do you know him at all?
Not really. I mean, just a couple like hi, hello type interactions, nothing crazy. And again, like he's been fine in those. And I think that's the other thing that's tough to articulate here. And I think we'll be able to get into it a little bit in this segment is like, he could be the smartest football mind of all time. But you said something last segment, which is the thing that I'm trying to wrap my head around how you would go about this, right? And what it is like you don't have an offense. You've been in a bunch of different offenses. You've probably like a bunch of different offensive principles. How do you distill that down into a clear, concise offensive vision? And maybe David Blough is so locked in. He's been doing this since he was in diapers, and he's kind of been pulling plays out and says, oh, I really like this kind of approach, philosophy, coaching point from Ben Johnson. Oh, and I really like how Kevin O'Connell tweaked it when I was there with him in Minnesota or whatever. And then I like Cliff's kind of perspective on this. And I'm going to use all these principles to kind of meld and shape and cut and select what I've got in my playbook. But that is hard to do, man. It's really hard to do. Like I think about with Kyle here in 2010, like I remember him telling me like I couldn't have done it without Chris Forrester. Because Chris Forrester basically developed all the rules for the run game and all the rules for the protection. And then Kyle learned them from Chris because Chris has this great foundation in offensive line, vernacular, and verbiage. And then you talk to Sean with Jay, right? And the one thing about Jay is like Jay helped me edit out, right? He helped me kind of learn like Sean's a computer, right? Sean is so smart. He's got a photographic memory. He remembers plays from 15 years ago. Everyone's seen those clips. Like I remember as a player being with him and him being like, hey, Logan, do you remember that, weak side cutoff on the backside of 18 week in 2014 where we got that Sam Mike? And I was like, no, Sean, I'm sorry. I don't remember that. Like you can draw it up and you can remind me or we can look at the clip, but I don't have that kind of recall. But he was like, Jay was the one who kind of taught me the feel of the game, right? And again, like everyone's got blind spots and everyone needs mentorship. And so I think that's the thing about this is like, who's going to help him put this thing together? Because it is a daunting, overwhelming thing to build an NFL offense.
And it's so important. Like if you look at Atlanta this year, Zach Robinson, I think, relied on like a extra set of eyes of like Kenny Zampese. And like, that thing never really got going, and I don't know how much of an impact he had. Like you have to pick the right guy who you tap it. That wasn't even on staff. That was just like your veteran that I'm going to as a first-time OC to kind of have some come to Jesus conversations. And like that's really, really important too, obviously. I'm glad you brought up Forrester, who, by the way, it won't surprise people, is currently the O-line coach and run game guy in San Francisco still with the 49ers, who's kind of bounced around with Kyle. But O-line coach to me is the biggest thing they're going to do. I found the firing of Bobby Johnson to be curious, if I'm being honest, but also fascinating. They didn't fire any other offensive assistants. In fact, they interviewed a bunch of them, including the primary Cliff Kingsbury ally, like David Rye, the tight ends coach, who came in with Cliff, and I would imagine will end up wherever Cliff is. But like he got interviewed for this job. Brian Johnson, I'm pretty sure I read, interviewed for the OC job. He gets bypassed. Does he stay? I don't know. I doubt it, but who knows? I'm speculating. But I guess my point is the only role that they said, nah, we're good, you're gone, is Bobby Johnson. I thought the line was pretty good. I don't know if you have a thought on what that signifies or means, but I think sometimes the O-line hire for a coordinator is the single most important one that you make. And I just wonder, like, who does Blough know? How comfortable is he with connections? Like, where do they go there? That's a make or break hire for him in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I think I'm really glad you brought that up because in a lot of ways, like the best paid assistant coach is the offensive line coach, and they're paid like a coordinator. So oftentimes you'll hear head coaches, I'm hiring 4 coordinators. I'm hiring defense, offense, special teams, and who's my offensive line run game coordinator? And there's a reason, like they are dealing with protections, they're dealing with run game, and it's not just like, I know that sounds like, oh, I'm going to draw this up or get this thing locked in. It's the rules of the runs, the contingency plans versus bad looks, the check. It's a very comprehensive position. So if you can hire someone there that's excellent, I think it can really offload a lot of responsibility. And so to the Bobby Johnson thing, like the thing about him and the thing about Cliff, in terms of things you hear coming out of the building, is that they weren't overly collaborative, right? So you've assembled this staff. You mentioned Brian Johnson, Anthony Lynn, guys that are David Rye, really smart guys, and we're not going to use those guys. We're just going to kind of shut ourselves in a room and develop the run game, and we're going to develop the pass game, and then that's it. So the one thing I will say about David Blough, because of his youth, is he's going to have to rely on other people. And I think that's one thing Dan Quinn, even when I was in Atlanta, really liked. He liked people who work together and were collaborative. So if you want to say, like, why are we making this change now? One of the reasons is because I think Blough is going to be hyper collaborative in this moment. Now, again, this goes back to constructing an offense. You want your offensive coordinator to have a very strong, clear vision, to be able to edit things out that they don't need. How much obligation does David Blough feel to take Anthony Lynn's ideas, to take David Rye's ideas, and then all of a sudden you get this kind of hydra monster of an offense where there's nothing really clear? That's also going to be deleterious, right? So like he's in this very unusual situation where he's got to build something from scratch. He's got to be very collaborative. How do you keep it clear and edited to the point where you get the best version of an offense? I mean, to me, it's a very tough position to be in for a young play call. And again, like, he might be the smartest dude of all time, and he's going to knock this out of the park. It's just, I want to convey how challenging I think this is going to be for him. And he might be a stud. It sounds like he is a stud, but I will be hyper impressed if he's able to get this done at a high level.
My biggest concern with the hiring is staffing and just connections, honestly. Like when you're this young and this green, it sounds like you kind of think that that's reasonable. I didn't know if I was overstating that, but I guess I didn't think enough about, like, you're talking about even just the paring down of 3 offenses and building his own offense, and even the play calling element on Sundays. Like, you've been around first time play callers. It sounds like, I don't want to say worried is probably too strong, but like, you have more nerves and anxiety about that than I've even considered. I kind of thought more about just the building of the staff part of it.
I mean, the building of the staff part's huge. And again, like, that's one of the reasons I've talked to, guys that I think are in line for head coaching positions. And one of the things they say is, like, I've got to wait 2 years, or I'm not ready yet. And I'm like, why? Like, you're super smart. Like, you're great in front of the room, all this stuff. And the thing that they always say is, I want to just make sure I've met enough people when it's time for me to put a staff together, like, I'm ready to go. And so, like, the staffing thing is huge, right? But again, like, calling a game is its own thing. Building a game plan is its own thing. Like, building an offense is its own thing. And I guess he's going to have a lot of time this offseason to work on it. But that's something I would just love to be a fly on the wall. Like, where is your starting point? Like, where is the starting point here? Like, what are you going to prioritize? Are you prioritizing Jaden Daniels? Are you prioritizing the run game? If you're going to prioritize the run game, then we got to get into play action passes, shots, formations, matching formations, motions that align. Like, what's the starting point here, and how do we get this done? It'll be really interesting to see kind of what they come up with.
Is McVay the only first-time play caller and coordinator that you played for? Do you remember?
I think Kyle was a first-time play caller also, right? Like, when
because he was in Houston before he came here.
But was he full-time, or was he pass game coordinator? I don't remember.
He was the OC. Now, I'd have to look if Gary Kubiak called plays or he did. I'm pretty sure Kyle did, though. Yeah, in Houston.
So, yeah, I think Sean maybe was the only first-time play caller.
I mean, right away, am I right to say that the person that was around then that I talked to yesterday told me there were, like, some significant bumps in the road that even maybe we wouldn't have seen? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing, man. It's like there's a trial by fire when it comes to putting something like that together, right? Because you say, I want to carry, just even from a play volume standpoint, And this is like a thing that Sean and Kyle both ran into when I was under them, right? And like in terms of as a player. And one of the things is like we want a solution for every possible contingency. So if they are going to play quarters match on third down, I want these 4 plays. But if it's cover 2, I want to make sure I have these on deck, and they're going to bring this kind of pressure, I want these on deck. So all of a sudden you're in like, just from right there, you're in like 10 plays. And like, I remember as a player, like, I don't think Kyle would mind me sharing this. Like he would come in on Monday after a game, be like, that's on me. Like we had too much in. And so understanding like what your group can tolerate, what you actually need, what you don't need is a big thing. Right. And again, like to me, that only comes with getting burned by the fire a little bit, saying, oh, that's too hot, that's too much, or that wasn't enough, or hey, maybe I didn't put these guys in enough positive positions. Like, how do I do that moving forward? So I think that's the thing to me that I have a lot of respect for this position and this process, because I know how challenging it can be to edit, take ideas, make sure you're not overloading the players while also staying dynamic and cutting edge. I mean, that's one of the reasons I've been so impressed with Kyle, Sean, Brian Johnson, is these guys that seem to carry a lot of play volume, but are able to make sure the guys are executing at a high level. So like, how do you do that? Like where is the line for you? Even what is your day one install? Are you an outside zone team? Are you a gap scheme? That has ripples and trickle down in terms of what you're going to do. Are you then a outside zone play action pass team?
Will he decide all of that himself? Or will he do that with the people he's bringing in? Or is Dan going to have some say? I also wonder that a little bit too. Like Dan's hiring this neophyte. I wonder if, in my opinion, like going down to Cliff's office and saying on a Wednesday, here's what I want you to do. There's going to be a little bit of, I'm Cliff, get out of here. I don't think you're going to get that from Blough. And I wonder how much that's part of this too. And is he going to be part of helping build this offense?
Well, I also think like you want your offensive coordinator to be, this is the thing that I also bump into. Like this is why it's such a it's such a fine line, such a small margin to hit, right? Because if you come in and so the O-line coach says, I want to do this. The running back coach says, I want to do this. The receiver coach says, I want to do this. And the head coach says, I want to do this. All of a sudden, right, the game plan is it's not clear. It's not who we are. It's like this weird, amorphous, grotesque collage of plays that have no bearing or support on one another. And everyone talks about good offenses, and good offenses are scaffolded out. Even Cliff's offense, as you can see, this formation, I run this. I'm going to stack that. We're going to get to this. I'm going to have this run out of this. This run protects this. And like, that's good offense. But all of a sudden, if everyone's got input, how as a first-time play caller do I edit things out? Editing is really the important thing here, and having the confidence to do that. And maybe David Blough is a beast. Maybe he's like the smartest dude of all time, and he's really confident to get that done. But to your point, like, are you hiring him so that you can have input? And then how do we build this thing out? That's the other thing that we were talking about with regards to the coaching staff. I think that's so important here is like, do you have someone that you can turn to and this is my foundational rock? I can kind of bounce ideas off. These are my foundational principles that allow me to edit things out. Like those are the things that I think are going to be really challenging for a young first-time play caller. And I can't wait to watch him do it because, again, it is really hard to do.
So this will be borderline redundant. We can leave it here. But the last thing I have to ask you, and we've kind of beat around this bush a little bit, is that I wanted to know the way you've done this is at the high school level from a coaching standpoint. But like, and you're basically asking this question rhetorically already, so I guess I know that you don't have an answer. But my question that I had written down was, like, how do you start the process of building your offense? And like, what is that process exactly? Because the way, just as like an outsider that doesn't know anything about anything, I'm thinking he's going, okay, here are the things I really liked about Ben. Here are the things I really liked about KOC. Here's the things I really like about Cliff. I want these three staples to kind of be what the Blough offense becomes. And then I would imagine you would start with like run game and protections and like philosophies in that way. And you marry all your play action stuff off of the runs so that they match up, which is kind of one of my gripes sometimes with Cliff stuff. And then you kind of build out from there. That's like what I would think, but I don't know anything. Like, what is the actual process? When you built a playbook in high school, what did you start with?
So again, like I can only speak from my experience, and then again, like what my mentors did. And again, like I messed stuff up, and when I did this the first time, I screwed it up, and this is what I have settled on in terms of process. I think you want a defining principle. Like, who do we want to be? Do we want?
Does that mean identity?
Identity, I think, is a great thing here, right? So, like, we want to be a run first, play action team, and even above that, we want to be physical, right? So then I say, okay, we'll run first, play action football club. And how many runs do we want to carry? What do we need? Here's 4 runs. Okay. Now, how do we protect those runs? Here's 4 play actions. Here's a couple keepers off of them, right? And you just kind of layer it in. And the reason that defining principle of, we want to be a run first, play action football club, and we want to be physical. The reason that is so important is because at some point, you're going to get somebody that says, I want to run this play, whatever it is. I want to run GT with a backside read, and we're going to run an RPO, and we're going to run a bubble screen off of it. And I have to look at that as a play caller and be like, does that abide by our identity? Does it abide by our verbiage? Can the kids handle that? And so because I've got this guiding light, this kind of lighthouse in the storm, I can say, are we that? And if we're not that, then I can say, no, we're not doing that.
So when you say we're not that, really quickly, do you mean from an identity standpoint, like we don't do RPOs, or do you mean that does not look like everything else that I've designed, and so it doesn't work because it's not like on I'm serving Mexican and that's steak. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit. So like we have RPOs in the offense, right? But they're off of our 4 base runs. So our 4 base runs, they evolve, they kind of tree out. There's an RPO element, there's a reverse element, whatever it is, right? But like what I'm saying is like, does that fit within the tentacles that we've already established, the roots we've already established? Does it fit? And then if it doesn't fit, can we tweak it to fit? Maybe that's personnel, maybe that's formation, maybe that's alignment, right? Whatever we're going to do there, maybe we can tweak it to fit. And then if we can tweak it, is it a one-off play? And if it is a one-off play, do I like it enough to call it one time? Do we have enough time to rep it one time? And then the other element that I would point to here is, in addition to the one-off element, is can I insulate the play? Can I cover it up? If we run it one time and it's a very distinct formation, like with a very obvious motion or very obvious alignment, what else can we run off of it? So every time we're in this formation, it's not an obvious tell. And those are the types of the decisions that are really challenging. Like they're really challenging to kind of build your offense out, rule it out, every single thing. And so I think that's where I would say, like, I can't wait to see what he does. Like I look at Ben Johnson's offense and I say, like, that's the one I'm probably most comfortable with, just from what it looked like, the execution, the philosophy, the principle of it. But again, like he's been in some fun offenses. Kevin O'Connell is very similar to that, right? Like very similar. And then you have Cliff. And so that's where it's like you have the thing that you've done the last 2 years stands seemingly to me very in opposition to those other 2 things. So how do you mix those up? And it's going to be a tough road with a lot of decisions that are going to be really important. The foundational decisions are going to be super important for what this offense becomes in training camp. And then again, like you have to trust that you've made those right decisions, and the offense will be supported enough heading into 2026 season.
One thing I'm also really interested and curious about is I remember talking to Kirk Cousins at one point about some of the offenses he'd been in within the last year. And he said that the main thing that was different about Kevin's offense that he had to like get with, so to speak, and figure out was in the passing game. And Sean does this too, by the way. And I think Kevin got this from Sean. But it's like NBA basketball where like everything goes through your best player in a sense. Mm-hmm. Like everything in LA essentially goes through like Puka Nacua in the passing game. And like it's not as much about, and now it's different a little bit with Devontae Adams, but like Kirk's point is like I've always been a point guard. Like I want to spread the ball around, go where my reads take me. I'm very much I will get the answers to the test based on the coverages. Whereas Sean's like, 15 targets for Puka Nacua. Like, and Kevin O'Connell, because you have Justin Jefferson, is that on steroids. And so if you look at it, like it was not a read it out, hit Addison, hit KJ Osborne. It was very much like, we are designing this to be Justin Jefferson as the center of the universe. And I just wonder if that's something that resonates with Blough, and that means very good things for Terry. Because the McVay, well, O'Connell, but through McVay, where he was the OC in LA, that's where that comes from. And I wonder if he's more of a point guard read it out guy, or if he is Terry McLaurin's about to eat because everything's about him, guy.
So you talk about things that change offensive principle. Last year when I was at the Combine, so I had to design this offense in this last offseason cycle. And one of the most important conversations I had was with someone from the Minnesota staff. And he basically looked at me, I said, how did you fix the quarterback there? Like, what happened? Like, how did you get him right? Talking about Sam Darnold. He goes, what's really helpful? And I was like, I'm expecting this, silver golden ball to fall from the ceiling,
Jefferson,
and it's going to be like, and he was just like, when the first guy's open, that helps the quarterback out a lot. And so I think, like, to your point, like, if you're designing an offense and that's the tenet, we want to limit the exposure of the quarterback, I have to scheme it up so that the first guy's open. How do you do that? Bunches, stacks, motion shifts, getting good playmakers in those positions, speaking to that skill, that person's skill set, right? And that's, again, those are offensive decisions that, again, can help you edit down stuff, right? Is this helping us with that offensive vision? And so, yeah, I do think that, like, for Terry, that's probably going to be something that's very helpful if you think that Terry can play at the level of a Puka Nacua or a Justin Jefferson. So, again, like, I think that's what I'm saying is, like, what is the fabric of your offensive identity? It's not plays necessarily, right? It's who do you want to be? Like, when you cut the tape on, the 2026 Commanders are what, right? And it's like, and everyone says, oh, well, they're a 12 personnel team or a 12. No, it's like, are they physical? Are they assignment sound? Like, those are the things you're looking at, right? Like, I think Indiana, talking about college football, runs a really simple offense, but they know exactly who they are. There's no compromise. There's no wavering. They know exactly what they want to be, right? They're a gun run team that gets downhill. They run inside zone. They run bounce to the perimeter. They have RPOs. They have play action shots. Like, that's who they are. And then everything else falls into those pillars and columns. And so, like, can you do that? Can you edit yourself enough to say, like, these are the principles we're going to be abiding by, right? And, like, I think that's a really good one. Can we help the quarterback is a good one. And then you have, like, if you got your paper written out, help the quarterback. How do we do that? Make sure the first guy's open. How do we do that? Motion shifts and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's where I'm kind of at, is, like, it's not so much the plays he's going to be running, it's the philosophy and then how he scaffolds the offense to support those tenets that he lays out.
Quick update on the search for a DC, which has certainly taken the back seat this week in the news here in the DMV. We'll do that next on Take Command. Welcome back to Take Command. We will get to the defensive coordinating search before we say goodbye in a moment. Logan, you've been talking about how complicated and difficult the job will be for David Blough, and it is certainly a tall order ahead. But I know you're also excited to see a 30-year-old guy who is a rising and ascending star, according to everyone who's been around him, get a shot at this thing.
Yeah, man, like I said, there's a lot of things that are going to be difficult about this, but I do think that, like, man, this is a dream come true. Like, getting this opportunity to, again, build this thing out, like, with a staff that you're going to be able to put together with a young quarterback who's maybe one of the bright stars of the NFL. Like, man, what an opportunity for him. And again, like, it sounds like from everybody that we've talked to that he's more than capable and ready to handle this opportunity. It's just maybe for my little, monkey brain over here, I'm just like, where do you even start with something like this? But I'm excited for him, and I'm excited to see what they do. And again, like, to the hiring initially, like, I think it takes some courage if you're Dan to go in this direction and talk about learning from past mistakes, in terms of letting some of these other guys walk. Like, again, like, this is, again, doubling down on your experience, making a hire, someone you believe in. I can't wait to see how it works out.
Yeah, I think it's bold. In a lot of ways, I really do think Quinn is kind of putting his future here in Blough's hands. On the defensive side, and we'll talk more about this in our pod later in the week, but I just wanted to update that we know of at least 3 interviews so far that have been made public and confirmed by the team. Defensive coordinator Patrick Graham from the Raiders, who's a longtime NFL defensive coordinator, who's had a lot of success. A D-line coach with the Chiefs, Joe Cullen, who has been a coordinator before in another stop. And then a DMV native, Denard Wilson, who went to high school in the area. He is the defensive coordinator with the Titans, who have had plenty of success and have some really good players on their D-line, including an All-Pro. He also interviewed for the job. Thoughts on any of those names or just the initial stages of this search? By the way, the Falcons, as of right now, are not letting Jeff Ulbrich talk to anybody else until they find out what they're doing from a head coaching standpoint, he's still my number one choice if there's such a thing.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I think Joe Cullen coming from Kansas City, I think that's always fun. I tend to lean towards wanting people at the mid-level of the defense, so he's a D-line coach. I think the guys you want are linebackers because they tend to coach the run fits really well. They tend to have an understanding of the secondary in terms of position coaches making the transition, kind of like offensively, like tight ends, whatever, tight end coaches, because they understand protections, run scheme, pass game, and that's why I think they make good offensive coordinators. But again, I love Kansas City's defense. I love their philosophy. I love their approach. So again, if he has any of that information in there, like in bringing that here, I think that's great. And then Wilson is interesting to me because I do think that Tennessee defense has overperformed this year. And I think that's kind of one of those groups that, for better or worse, like when I go into a season and I think of a side of the football, and then I think that they've played better than that, I usually look to coaching. Whether that's right, wrong, that's burned me in the past, but it's also not led me astray a couple of times. So I think that both those guys are interesting. Obviously, the experience of the guy from Las Vegas is also interesting. But again, I'm always a big believer. You want on defense, especially someone who's young and got a lot of passion, a lot of energy, and those two, the second two guys you mentioned, sound like they fit more in that bucket.
Yeah, we'll talk a lot more about the DC possibilities and options on the show coming up later this week. David Blough, the offensive coordinator of the Commanders, though, the headline here for this episode of Take Command. Big thanks to our producer, Evan O'Brien, for putting things together. For Logan, I'm Grant, saying so long. Thanks for checking us out. Remember, you can always watch the stream, 106.7, Team 980 YouTube channels, and make sure you subscribe, rate, and review to Take Command. We've got multiple eps coming your way all off season long.